the February 23rd ACSD board meeting. Thank everyone for joining. As always, we'll start off with introductions. Peter B.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Suzanne.
Suzanne Buck.
Chip.
Chip Malcolm.
Jen.
Jen Newsteeder.
Davina.
Hi.
Jory.
Dory Jacobite.
Peter.
Peter Conlon.
Lorraine.
Lorraine Morse.
Vicky.
Vicki Wells, Director of Student Services.
Amy.
Amy McGlashan.
Caitlin.
Caitlin Steele, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Victoria.
Victoria Jetty.
And Brittany.
Brittany Gilman.
Great. And at this time, Peter, could you read off attendee names, please?
You're muted, Peter.
I'm the one who's supposed to say that, right? Sorry. Paul Sherrier, Allison McNamara, Alice Scriberhorn, Amy Clapp, Amy Mason, Andrea Way, Andrew Conforti, Ann Rubright, Ariana Bailey, Barb Wilson, Ben Weir, Bjarke Sears, Brian M., Chris Kramer, Christina Wadsworth, Colleen Ringquist, Deb Karpak, Deb Koretz, Faith Scaramucci, Heather Gibo, Hugh McLaughlin, James Robinette, Jen Broderson, Jen Billings, Joanna Doria, Julia Altimos, Julie Berg, Katie McDougall, Larry O'Connor, Lisa Rader, Liza Allen, Martha Santa Maria, MCTV, Megan Sears, Mike Lennox, Nancy Crawford, Natalie Kryzo, Natasha Costin, Rob DeBrune, Ruth Bernstein, Zura Naidu, Tanya Scuteri, Tara Martin, Val Calzini, Zoe Noble.
Great, thank you very much. As always, we're going to start off with the public comment portion of the meeting. If you do have a public comment that you would like to make, please raise your Zoom hand. Peter will then bring you over to the panelist area where you'll be able to make that comment, and then once you're done, return you back over to the attendee area. So with that, Peter, go you.
Okay, it's Paul Sherrier, welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'd like to make a request. Maybe this is my place, but I would request that Bjarke go first. I would love to go second, but would you mind bringing Bjarke in first? I'll stay here. You don't have to put me out. I'll listen to him. But would you mind doing that?
Not a problem. He's coming over right now.
Thank you so much.
Hello, just trying to get myself organized here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, my name is Bjarke Sears, and I am here along with Paul and obviously a large contingent of people to talk to you about an important issue today. Just to let you know, I'm a 15-year teacher here at ACSD. My wife Eileen is 16 years at MUMS. I'm a father of a MUMS 7th grader. I'm a father of a Cornwall Elementary student. And probably most importantly, I'm a teacher here and someone who's very concerned about our pension. And we're here to talk to you a little bit about pensions today. And you might be wondering right off the bat, why us? Why here? Most of us anyway, are not legislators. We are not people who necessarily can have an immediate impact. Well, let me get this out of the way so that we can talk about some of those things without that question. We're here tonight for 3 reasons. The first is to use this forum to educate you and the public about the current assault on teachers' retirement. Teachers have always paid our share. The state, frankly, has not. Now we're potentially being asked to pay more and receive much less because of no fault of our own. Apparently, a promise made is not a promise kept. We also are here to ask you to use your standing as our educational leaders to support us and to use your influence within or on the Vermont legislative delegation to try to stop this really unfair attack. We also would love for you as the board, we would ask you to formally request for Vermont School Boards Association to take a position opposing the changes that Treasurer Pierce and others are advocating. And we would also like to challenge each of you individually as politically independent actors to take a public stand before Election Day. This is particularly important both for members of the board who are running for re-election and for others who are running for seats, to let the public and your teachers know how you feel. If you are going to lead us, we need to know you stand with us. So that's why we're here. So what are the basic issues? Due to state underfunding, primarily during the 1990s, to be fair, the state teacher's pension is underfunded. And let me understand what that means. Were they to pay all the retirees who could possibly retire, all of us, if we just all quit and were able to retire, if they had paid us all at once, there wouldn't be enough money. So that is a problem. This is called an unfunded liability. So to fix this, Treasurer Pierce has advocated a few things. First of all, eliminating our cost of living adjustment once we retire. That would mean that our pay would, or the retirement amount would never go up. Keep in mind, the average teacher retirement is $21,000 a year. That's our average amount we get, $21,000. Now extrapolate that over 20 years of retirement. What are we looking at the end? They have also said they want to use a longer term to determine what our average is. Currently, our pension is figured out, the amount we get paid is based in many ways on the final 3 years we get paid. The state would like to move that to the final 7 years and take an average. There's no reason for that number. It's arbitrary, right? But it's a number. If you go from 3 to 7, you're going to have to pay people less. So all we hear is, okay, we're just going to use different numbers so we can pay you less. And then we are also being asked to pay more, to move from making 5 or 6% of our income to go to our pension to pay 8%. Okay, so we are being asked to pay more so we can receive less and get no cost of living increase. Okay, so you might say, well, hold on. If not everyone's going to retire at the same time, why are they even necessarily worried about this unfunded liability? Well, more clarity is starting to emerge. There is some talk in Montpelier that in the spring, the state would like to put out some bonds. And of course, bond ratings matter, okay? And the amount that you have in terms of liabilities makes a difference, especially if you have unfunded liabilities. If that is true, that's beyond the pale. If it's true that we are being asked to sacrifice to make economic adjustments on bonds, that's not fair. Okay, so we realize the important point. Nobody needs this money at the same time. So to call this a crisis is contrived. Okay, so why should you care? You might be sitting here saying, all right, that doesn't sound totally fair. Why should we care as a board? Well, number one, because we're your teachers, right? You've been publicly touting us, hey, we really appreciate the work you do. Teachers are awesome, everything else, right? And our work and thanking us. This matters a lot more than platitudes, right? This is our lives. These are retirement. These are the things we need to be recognized for. These are our lives you're talking about. Number two, because it affects your hiring. Just forget about us for a minute. What about the people you're going to hire? Paul's going to talk about this a lot more in a minute. But it's very clear that this will hurt Vermont's ability to hire. Think about it. We may already make less than the teachers in neighboring states. We are currently one of only 20 states not prioritizing teachers for vaccination. And the state is trying to slash our pensions, right? Why would people necessarily move here to be a teacher, right? Part of the reason we say is, because the quality of life. Well, now take that $21,000, extrapolate that out 20 years, and let's talk about quality of life. And this is particularly important if you want to attract diverse teachers to our state. And finally, I would say, because of your own focus on equity, there's a lot of talk, and there should be in the board, about equity. Let's consider something. This attempt by the state will perpetuate and worsen gender pay gaps that already exist. 75% of the school employees in Vermont are women. Interestingly, teachers get paid according to let's see what year is it, 2018 Rutgers University study. Teachers in Vermont make 87% of what similarly educated people in the state make. So that's an interesting thing, right? You're talking about a profession that is predominantly women, and yet getting paid less. Aren't these things that we are concerned about? Are you okay with that? I guess would be one thing to ask. So in a year when the government's trying very hard to use funds to not have major impacts on people, and when there are important conversations about equity and fairness, How can we not stand up to an action that will so disproportionately affect women? Especially when research from the pandemic shows that women are being affected more than men in terms of wages lost and the burdens of the additional responsibility of remote and hybrid schooling. Well, it shouldn't be the case. This pandemic has made gender equality worse. This issue will only add to that. So we ask you to stand with us and to stand up for us. Please use your influence to ask legislators to truly support us, not just offer vague platitudes of appreciation. 2, ask formally for the Vermont School Board Association to recommend to legislators that we fix these issues without putting the burden on teachers. And 3, and finally, we would ask you to take individually a public stand of support for your teachers. For all of you, educational support is part of your individual political platform. Now is a true fork in the road, and you have a chance to decide which road to follow. From our perspective, there is no middle path. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, you're next.
Okay, thank you, Bjarki. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. Paul Sherrier, I've been teaching at MUM since 1997. I am also here to ask for your support in opposing Beth Pierce's proposed changes in the pension system. And as a matter of fact, any changes in the pension system. We're not here to negotiate. For us, nothing can change in that system. We want what's been promised to us. So basically, a little story for you. So I moved here from Maryland. And when I got here, I remember being so impressed with the professionalism and the diversity of the staff. There were people from all over the country, Midwest, down south, mid-Atlantic, and from neighboring states in the Northeast, as well as teachers from Vermont. And it's been very impressive. Now, over the years, we've had a tremendous amount of turnover, as you can imagine. And I've been reflecting upon that recently, and I remember having a conversation with Peter Brinkley, who many of you know, and he, I can remember him right at the end of his career saying how he would walk around the building and just marvel at the level of teaching and the quality of teachers that were in the building at the time. He thought, in his opinion, it was at an all-time high. So through the years, we've been able to maintain this standard of hiring diverse, talented faculty, not only from within our state, but also from outside of our state. And this is the concern that we have. Even as an older teacher, I care a lot about education in Vermont, and we are going to have difficulty if these changes were to go through, maintaining, as Bjarki alluded to, the diverse, getting talented, diverse teachers from around the country. Just as a quick example, and not only that, also the teachers from within Vermont, why would they stay? Just a quick example, I was talking to a friend of mine who was an educator in New York State last week, and in New York State, after 10 years of paying into the system, into the retirement system, he no longer has to pay anything. He's contributing 0%, as opposed to our current 5 or 6% or the proposed 8%. He pays nothing. He's paid nothing since 10 years been in the system. And when he retires, he'll get 70%, 76% of his salary. Vermont, we get between 55 and 60% of our salary, which is going to be, as Bjarki talked about, it's going to be lower than it was previously adjusted for. So that's a problem. So it begs the question, why would you come to Vermont, and why would you stay in Vermont if you were an educator? And this is a real thing. I know there's teachers in my building who are young, who I've talked about possibly moving out of the state. I know for a fact teachers at my age or my level of experience are calling the retirement board and seeing if they can buy back years, if they can get out. And that's what makes it a real thing. People are going to leave if you're gonna make this uncomfortable for us, and people are not going to want to stay, and people are not going to want to come here. We have student teachers in our building right now that are excellent from Middlebury College, and there is no way that they would stay here to teach, knowing what they know. They see what's going on here. So bottom line, for you as a board, you do the hiring. I know it's important to you to have the best for our students and hire the most talented teachers, and not in opposing these changes will allow you to continue to do that. So again, we just ask for your support, and please stand with us, because the bottom line is this is a people business. Programs, policy, I know that's what you guys are about most of the time, but it's the people that make this thing go. And without those teachers, without those talented and diverse teachers from around the country and within the state, it won't be the same. And we only want what's best for our students. So thank you very much. And please find it within yourselves to stand with us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Paul. Other folks?
Yeah, we have Ruth Bernstein.
Hi, okay, can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Ruth Bernstein, and I have something, a different topic I'm going to talk about. I recently heard the Churchill quote, "Never let a good crisis go to waste," used in reference to the recent situation in Texas, and it seems applicable here too. The situation is really not good currently. One town has voted to leave the district. Another held a vote, and 2 others have seriously considered holding such votes. Sorry, excuse me. More generally, there's not a lot of trust between you and your constituents. I hope you will be brave enough to acknowledge how bad the situation is, look at how it got this way, and really analyze how to build a more positive way forward, generally and specifically with facilities planning. I also wonder why an amicable divorce type situation was not discussed with Ripton to move us away from division and to a more productive situation for everyone. The board chair has even said keeping Ripton in the district against their will would not be a positive situation for anyone. I also want to say I'm sorry about the noise, that I have never questioned anyone's motives. We all want what is best for students. Excuse me. However, for some reason, it seems that the board and administration is moving in directions that do not align with the values held by the community. I think some of this is the design of the board itself. In order to take on the amount of meetings and responsibility required, with meetings primarily in Middlebury pre-pandemic and a very broad purview in terms of geography and constituents. It's in order to serve on such a volunteer board, one really must have more resources and privilege than our average community members. And I think this is part of the disconnect and something of which the board should be very cognizant. Our community really values our community schools more than fancy new buildings, more than IB. We really value our classroom teachers and support staff more than a lot of highly paid administration and specialists and others who are not primarily direct student contact. The predetermined direction many of us feel the administration and board have been moving in says it is to serve all of us, but it feels like it is more to attract and serve elites from other places and is not founded in our values, traditions, and way of life. It has felt a lot like we are being told we know better than you what is good for you. Thank you for listening, and I really think we can all work together from where we're at and try and make things better. Thanks.
Okay, Val Calzini.
You're on mute if you're speaking.
Sorry, I wasn't speaking. It shut me off. You all went away. I didn't know what happened. I can put myself on. So I'm here tonight to add to what Paul and Bjarke said. I'm Valerie Calzini, and I'm the Cornwall kindergarten teacher. I've been teaching in Vermont my entire career, and I'm here to ask the board and the public to do all that they can to support our teachers by opposing changes to the teachers' pensions. My whole entire career, I've been here and I've trusted Vermont's word that the commitment we agreed to would be honored when I was hired as a really young, excited, energetic teacher. Over the years, I've been required to make my contributions to the fund, and that's money that I could have chosen to invest elsewhere to keep me secure in my retirement. So my safety and security in retirement has been based on this promise, and now is at risk, because the changes would make it impossible for me to take care of myself in my retirement. I hope that I can count on my employer and my neighbors to make sure that Vermont maintains its investments in education, because teachers are, frankly, our biggest investment in education. And that we all work to make sure that our legislature keeps its promises to our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Val.
Alice Grimmerhorn.
All right. Hello, thank you for listening to everyone tonight. Those of us too who are expressing our feelings about the teachers' retirement, the threat to our teachers' retirement. And I too join the rest of the teachers who are asking you to oppose any changes to that system. And I want to just echo what Val said about feeling that many of us can't possibly make up the difference that these changes will cause to our retirement. We have made decisions in our careers based on those figures. And in 2010, I believe it was, we had already made a change where we significantly increased our contribution, and it changed the conditions in which we could retire and actually lengthened it already. So this feels really unfair. And as I said, many people are not going to be able to recover from this. And it feels like a bait and switch. It feels like very, very unfair and unethical, really, to do this to people. That you want this money stays in the state. Most everyone is going to stay here. This is our home, and it is a good investment and it is fair. So I'm asking you to do what you can to oppose these changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's it.
Yep.
Great. As always, thanks everyone for taking the time to be part of public comment. Next on the agenda is a recommendation to approve the minutes of February 8th. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Victoria, can I get a second?
Second.
Lorraine, second. Great. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Super. All those in favor, Zoom hand aye. Wonderful. Any opposed? Minutes are passed. Next up, the bills. Chip?
The bills were read, one set of bills on February the 15th, 2021. Total was, out of the general fund, was $431,487 or $67.35. They all seemed reasonable. We approved them, and I make a motion that we pay the bills.
Great. Can I get a second?
Second.
Victoria, all those in favor? Any opposed? Great. Thank you. Okay, next up is report of the board. We'll start off on the discussion and talk a little bit about the process for the superintendent evaluation and timeline. Peter.
Great. So I sent something, board members, to all of you over the weekend. This is the annual evaluation. So the links that I sent you are links to documents. So those include all the evidence for the 4 different standards, the model and the outline as a whole. And then I talked a little bit, as you probably remember, about the process. So the next part of this process is for me to meet with the executive committee. I know the communication was about communicating directly with the chair, as is laid out in board policy. So over the next week or so, if you could reach out to Mary with information you want to share based on those standards and my own self-assessment, I will then arrange to meet with the executive committee after that and go over the evaluation and go from there. So this is just a kind of a reminder, and if you do have any questions about the process or anything, please reach out to me and I can help. And there may be a couple documents in there that I thought I shared, but maybe didn't share well. So if you run into a document that isn't opening for you, let me know.
Great. And folks, just feel free to reach out directly or any way that you're comfortable with, and share any thoughts that you have on that. That would be super helpful. Any questions or comments on that? Great. Next up was the responses to the secession queries that we've been receiving. And I know that there has been, and Amy McGlashan, her committee has done a lot of work in trying to figure out the best vehicles to use to get information out there. And we have been utilizing multiple ways of getting communication out. Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about what has been done to date?
Yeah, sure. Let me know if I need to go off video, please. So our committee met last week, and of course it was vacation week, so we weren't able to connect with Erica until this week, but we talked about a few ways to disseminate the information around the frequently asked questions, basically, around the financial implications either way, and some other questions around educational community and such. So we sent a press release that for whatever reason didn't get printed last week, because we also were talking about tonight's meeting on there, but it will make it out this week. And we did a post, we did a sort of quick board communique, like a board newsletter, that got sent out today with some updated information, in fact, and then a printed copy, just like we did with the board newsletter last month. A printed copy will be sent home with the kids on Friday, so that those who don't have internet or aren't internet savvy or don't get their news that way, that they'll be able to receive some of the information that way. And am I forgetting anything, committee or Peter?
We had done a front porch forum blast.
Oh, thank you. Right, and of course, in front porch forum. Yep. That got circulated all last week. Yep.
Peter B?
Yeah, just one thing to add. A few people had questions around the financial implications, that document. So Brittany worked on that. I think she updated that yesterday. And so that is now updated. Brittany, do you want to just, it would probably be helpful for you, just because people had different questions about that, if you could just give a quick kind of rationale of how that all those pieces fit together?
Sure. So as we've talked about, there's a lot of variables with this and a lot of unknowns. So my goal and sort of my the assumptions that I made were ones that I felt were defensible and reasonable. It's, a simplified version of what something might look like. But it was something that I tried to take things that felt really clear what they were and why I was using those figures. So, for example, in the in the scenario in which Ripton would withdraw entirely and their equalized pupils would remain with them and they would become their own district, I reduced their expenditures that we can attribute specifically to them. That's from the budget book, as well as the facilities costs I was able to contribute directly to them, the cost of a Ripton bus, and then tried to prorate some other small expenses like technology and professional development. And then I also reduced any revenues that I felt were really clear about how to peel out, like the elementary tuition that they receive from Hancock and Granville students, their portion of the small schools grant, and then I added back tuition revenue for Ripton students to attend MUMS and MUHS, and that's how I got that figure. And then I peeled off their equalized pupils and just compared what that would look like to what our current proposed equalized pupils is. And then for the other scenario that we looked at, which was Ripton remaining as part of ACSD, but the school closing, I still reduced the Ripton school expenditures and the facilities, but I didn't reduce transportation costs or other prorated costs. I also didn't increase transportation costs because there is already a Ripton bus and the Hancock Granville bus that comes down the mountain. So, you know, the thought was that that would be able to continue to serve those students. And then I, maintained I did not add in tuition revenue. I still reduced the small schools grant portion because presumably with the school not operating, you wouldn't get that. And then I just ran the calculations from there. So they were just things that I felt like were really clear and identifiable. That doesn't mean that there aren't other things, but we don't really have a model or an example to look to as to what something like this might look like in the state.
Brittany, one of the questions that we've been getting is around the debt that when Ripton, when we unified the debt that of Ripton that was assumed by the district as a whole, what would happen to that debt and what implication that would have on the district?
I don't know the answer to that question.
And is that because we're not sure what happens to the debt just from a legal perspective?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking, like there were articles that were drawn up to bring the debt in. I don't know if the same thing would happen in reverse. It seems likely, but
Yeah, that's
I'm not a lawyer, so.
That's my assumption as well.
How much is the debt?
I'd have to check on it. Their total debt payments are not very much. They're like, $12,000 a year, I think, but I don't know what their total outstanding principal is. I'll have to double check that.
It's mostly, I believe it's mostly the solar project.
Yeah.
And Peter B, is that something that, is that information that would be finalized post a vote?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to have, you mean the answer to that question or the number?
The answer.
We can follow up on that to see if there's, statute or something that speaks to that. A lot of the questions or a lot of the eventualities of what happens are to be determined by the state board. And that may be one that, to me, logically, if the district took on a debt 5 years ago, 4 years ago, that debt seems like it would go back to, if the town then withdraws and forms the district again, it's logical. But again, we can follow up, and I can follow up tomorrow and see if there's a quick answer, and if there's not, we can certainly let people know.
I think that's part of the challenge, right? Like there is going to be this list of things that we just aren't going to know because no one had the perfect crystal ball, nor could one have a perfect crystal ball into all of the considerations.
Right, and one of those is the timeline. How fast does it go? So if all 6 towns approve, then it goes to the state board and gets onto the state board agenda. How fast, how the state board works through that is a kind of to be determined.
Okay. Yes, Chip.
Another question I've gotten is, what happens to ACSD? Since if we lose a town, and thus the whole structure of our voting and board membership, so to speak, which was a pretty difficult thing to come up with, then becomes disrupted, does that potentially lead to even a whole dissolution of ACSD, and we would have to go through the whole process again? That's frightening to me.
I have not heard that from anyone. I think given how the board structure was created, and Suzanne was the co-chair on that charter committee, because it's based on population in each town, I don't think there would be any change in the number of board members would go from 13 to 12. But I don't think there would be any other change to the board structure.
I would hope not.
I mean, the other thing that is not known, and there are two pathways, and this is something that Donna Russo Savage, who has communicated with many citizens who have written the state to ask questions about what happens if, is, if Ripton secedes, are they assigned to White River or Rutland Northeast, or is ACSD turned back into ACSU? And the state board has, from what I understand, has the ability to do either one.
Well, all of that to me is uncomfortable, honestly.
Any other questions or comments on this? All right, Amy.
I actually, to clarify, because in the FAQs, when that question comes up, I just want to make sure that people understand how it was answered, because there is statute that the state board can't assign an independent district to what do we call it, a union district or whatever. So they would have to either dissolve us and turn us back to ACSU, or assign the district elsewhere. Does that make sense?
The only thing I would say is it's not dissolving ACSD, it's adding another layer, it's adding ACSU. So ACSD would stay, in a similar way to kind of how Rutland Northeast is structured right now. So Rutland Northeast has the Otter Valley Unified, I think it's called, and then they've got Chittenden, and they have an SU over all of those. So it's kind of the same thing, where ACSD wouldn't be dissolved, I don't think. It would be more, ACSD would still be the 6 towns, and then there would be ACSU, which would look over Ripton and ACSD.
So if that's not clear in the way the FAQs are, then I don't know if people should take a look at that and see if that needs to be.
Yeah.
And then Peter, one of the other questions that we're seeing is, what is then the governance structure of that ACSU? So in an instance where you have ACSD and we have this governance structure that is then 12 towns, what governance structure would ACSU be?
The ACSU would be, it can be brokered between two districts within, but it's not proportional like the board is. And that's why previously, if you remember, we had 3 members on our SU board, ACSU board. We had 3 members from each town. So it wasn't proportional to the number of voters within that town. So it's a representative structure. But Donna responded to a question about that and said it's something that could also, if there's a big imbalance in numbers, could be something that both parties agree to a certain structure for that that board.
Yeah, and I don't know how many of you were part of the board when there was an SU structure, but the gist of an SU structure is that the SU doesn't have any taxing authority, so all the revenues from the SU come from either assessments from member school districts and grants, basically. So oftentimes the SU becomes the LEA, which is the local education authority, for like federal grants that it all passes through the SU. So it's really like a governing structure that typically includes centralized services like the superintendent and fiscal services and sometimes tech and special education. They live there, and the SU budget is approved by the SU board, not the taxpayers, and it gets assessed out to the member districts. So it's a couple more layers.
Sounds very simple.
Yeah.
As are all things in Vermont education, finance, and tax law.
Very simple. Any other comments or questions on this? Okay. And so then we have, starting at 7 o'clock, the next component of our evening will be the public information hearing annual meeting that the governor will be hosting for us, former governor. And so we're just gonna, it's this link, Peter, do we just stay on?
No, it's a different link.
It is a different link.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I've been working with Governor Douglas, and we're going to, it's a webinar format, but we're going to bring everybody over. We can bring up to 100 people over onto the screen, and then if there are more than 100, then they'll be over on the attendees. They could still talk, but we won't have video for more than 100.
And just from a process perspective, could you remind everybody who will be speaking during the meeting and that format?
So it's not a board meeting. It's the annual meeting of the community. So the moderator, Governor Douglas, will be running the show. He'll be introducing he'll be going through the articles, and then Brittany and I will be presenting the budget book and the budget and talking about the budget. There'll also be an opportunity for board candidates to speak. And that's kind of roughly the agenda.
Perfect. Any comments on that? All right. So, oh yes, Davina.
Sorry, I may have missed it because I'm trying to get dinner for the little one, but is this, Peter, are you just going to be transferring this link over to the session, or is there another link?
There's another link. Yep. And
Okay.
you have a link for it.
Okay, I'll just have to go through my emails, I guess, and find it. All
Well,
right.
if that doesn't work, you can also go to our calendar and catch the link there too.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. So next up is other. We do want to congratulate Vicki Wells on your new appointment and opportunity to get back closer to kids, Vicki, as a principal, and just really just so excited for you and for those kids, and want to thank you so much for all that you have done in service of this district, and really congratulate you on behalf of everyone. So thank you so much. We'd love to hear your thoughts as you take this on. This is a huge shift, and one I imagine you are so excited for.
It's going to be a very large shift, especially having spent the last 17 years doing the Director of Student Services. But I am really, it's bittersweet, and it's with mixed emotions that I leave, because I love what I do and really foresaw myself just just staying until after or till retirement. And the opportunity arose, and the idea of, especially after COVID, the idea of being back in an elementary school building, being with kids, and really watching systems change on a day-to-day basis and having a greater impact on systems change and on student outcomes, and the ability to serve the community just was too appealing to pass by. So I'm very excited, and like I said, it's bittersweet. I have a lot of great memories here at ACSD. So.
Thank you very much for being a part of our community, and good luck in this next stage of your career. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
And we would also like to take this opportunity to thank Jory. Jory, this is going to be your last board meeting, I believe, if I check my calendar. And it's, you know, it is important work and it's hard work. And thank you very much for the tone and the thoughtfulness that you have brought to this group of people and to the work of ACSD. I have really enjoyed personally and have learned greatly from you, and really appreciate all the work that you have volunteered to do. So thank you very, very much.
I, like Vicky, will be getting back into my classroom more, so.
Awesome. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Really appreciate it. Any other comments or thoughts? Peter C.
I thought I'd just add some clarification to some of the comments we heard earlier about the teacher pension program. And really, the issue is not just teachers, it's also state employees' pension, as well as the other benefits that they earn as they move into retirement, such as healthcare and whatnot. And mostly what I really want to clarify is in Bjarke Sears' statements, he sort of talked about the treasurer, the state, and Montpelier, and used the terms interchangeably. So just to tell you what is up is that we have a problem. It's a very serious problem. And the treasurer has essentially sounded the alarm, not that it hasn't been sounding for a long time, but she has put forth a list of proposals to address the problem. Essentially, all of those issues combined take up about 15% of all of our general fund spending in Vermont, and that number is growing somewhat quickly. At this point, they are only a list of possibilities that have been sort of given to the legislature, and the legislature is now going to look at those, look at a lot of other information, look at a lot of different scenarios, and try to sort of work through a solution that could bring everybody to the table. The teachers are not wrong when they say that the sins of the past are coming back to haunt us through, I mean, there's a lot of blame to put around. There was time in the 2000s when there were proposals floated, but the unions fought it. There was terrible spending of this money in the 90s and early 2000s that has really contributed mostly to this problem. And now it needs to be addressed. And so not to say yay or nay on their comments, but just to put some clarification that what's going on right now is a series of proposals. They are alarming proposals, but they are, and that's at that point only the legislature is looking at them carefully, but also looking at a lot of other ideas that have been used in other states to sort of get out from under this.
And Peter, what's the timeline on all this?
We can, kick the can down the road forever and just have that unfunded liability that they were referring to build up and take a greater share of our what we spend each year in the state, but that comes at the expense of a lot of other things. Or we can get a handle on it, use more of our surplus money, whatever we can, to start paying down this unfunded liability. It's really complex to understand. I'm still having trouble getting my arms around it all. But it's, you know, the solution goes out to 2038 at this point. So it's a long-term solution to get that unfunded liability down. But the steps that need to be taken soon, within the next couple of years, to really sort of come up with a long-term plan to keep everything viable. I mean, what we don't want is a pension system for either the state employees or the teachers that is no longer viable.
But will the legislature in this session, like, what's that timing on
Within this biennium, their steps will be taken. So within either this session or the next year, a plan will come up. There's lots of time spent at the table among leadership in the legislature and leadership of the NEA and the Vermont State Employees Association, you know, to sort of say, well, you know, it needs to be, we all need to move forward together.
Ben?
Peter, do you have suggestions as to timing and tone and whom to direct any support that we can, or, you know, advocate for a certain, you know, initiative that you might be seeing coming along the road? Or
well, I
should
think
we
probably need to wait and see what is actually the proposal that is actually where the rubber meets the road. I mean, right now we've got what the treasurer has suggested. That's not the final, you know, the final end of the road idea. We're going to work on something. I would say, you know, when there is a proposal, and hopefully it'll be a proposal that all the parties have sort of signed on to, that probably is the best time to really look at what it is and how we feel about it.
Okay. Yes, Peter B.
We probably need to wrap this up just because the other meeting's starting soon. I gotta open that one up.
All right. Motion to adjourn. Chip, Lorraine, great. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you in a few minutes.